James O'Keefe is out, and Project Truth is no longer true. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is another declaration of truth from your host, Terry A. Hurlbut. Project Veritas just fired their founder, President and CEO, James O'Keefe III, in an obvious coup. The reasons they give for his firing are worse than specious, but as it is, the company's donors will likely not let them get away with it. Even those who agree with the firing will soon discover that they inherit a rudderless and terminally confused company. Harsh? Yes, and I mean it to be. Before I get down into the bloody, gory details, I do want to shout out to the prime sponsor of this channel, which is Conservative News and Views. Link in the description. And be sure to check out the awesome CNAV Store. Scroll down near the bottom for that link. Lots of great merchandise there, especially this t-shirt that I have chosen for today, which reads, "Do not bear false witness," which is what just happened to James O'Keefe. This is meet John Doe type stuff. Gary Cooper would certainly sympathize. One more thing, if you like what you're about to hear, you can like this video. You can also click the bell icon to get a notice every time I come out with a new one. In fact, do you see the new icon, the heart shape with the US dollar sign on it? That's the super thanks icon. If you really want to keep these videos coming, click that and leave me a tip. Any currency will do, so long as it's legal tender. So, Whiskey Tango Foxtrot happened to James O'Keefe. James O'Keefe made his latest big splash when following up on a big intelligence score by a Project Veritas operative. Jordan Tristan Walker, PhD, Director of Research and Development, Strategic Operations, and mRNA Scientific Planning at Pfizer Pharmaceuticals, told this operative over several drinks that he personally oversaw efforts at Pfizer to mutate the virus that shall remain nameless and release the variants in order to have vaccines ready to distribute at need. I've told you about this before. This was the most serious admission of racketeering and germ warfare by any employee at a major drug company. I have a link in the description to a video of that interaction, though it's on Rumble, not YouTube. Well, James O'Keefe later confronted Walker directly, which resulted in an altercation. I have a link in the description to that video also, and that still is on YouTube. This happened on January 25th, 2023. Pfizer later denied doing the kind of research Dr. Walker described. YouTube, for its part, blocked the video that Project Veritas uploaded of the initial interview. But of course, Project Veritas has an account on Rumble, so that version of the video remains. But for how long will it remain? That is no idle question, because within days of this story breaking, Project Veritas Board of Directors embarked on the most shocking, most egregious, and least honest and honorable campaigns to vilify a company founder in the history of non-profit public charities and advocacy groups. This will utterly destroy Project Veritas, which is, quite simply, no longer worthy of its name. They might just as well call themselves Project Falsum, as far as I'm concerned. On February 2nd, 2023, James O'Keefe abruptly and without explanation went on paid leave from Project Veritas. Soon afterward, word came out that the board asked him to absent himself from the company and not contact anyone. Almost at once the rumors started to swirl around him. According to some disjointed accounts, a parade of employees marched into the boardroom to complain about O'Keefe's treatment of them in the would-be funny were it not so sad department. One employee apparently accused him of taking her sandwich out of her hand and eating it. Well, why didn't I report this at the time? Because I just flat couldn't believe what I was hearing, that's why. And since I could not independently verify anything that I was hearing, I kept quiet and talked about other things. Then, less than a week later, February 8th, a Twitter user calling himself Swig dropped a thread. I have links in the description to 9 of the tweets, the odd numbers. And here is how the text ran. Quote, "A whistleblower has contacted me about the news that James O'Keefe was put on leave and stripped of all authority at Project Veritas. This is difficult for me to publish as a staunch supporter of PV for years and even a VIP at their events. But what is happening to James O'Keefe is unconscionable, and the attempted hostile takeover of Project Veritas needs to be stood against by its supporters. This will not stand." James is a bit of a victim of poor corporate structure, as PV is 2 separate organizations, a 501c3, which had very few board members and the majority of the money, and a 501c4, which had significantly more board members but less money. According to my source, this situation has allowed 2 alleged ringleaders of this attempt to push James out to have significant sway over the others, despite their reasons being essentially meritless. Board members and C-suite officers involved in this, according to my source, are as follows. Board members: Matt Tierman, the ringleader; John Garvey; George Skakel. Skakel? Any relation to Michael Skakel, who very likely beat a murder rap because his Aunt Ethel married Bobby Kennedy? I have not been able to determine that. Anyway, the list of board members continues with Joseph Barton, not the U.S. representative, and Steve Allenbick. We also have 2 officers implicated, Chief Financial Officer Tom O'Hara and Chief Operating Officer Barry Hinckley, the other ringleader. Swig source says, quote, "The board held a 6.5-hour struggle session against James, where they subjected him to constant derision and insults. At the insistence of Tierman, O'Hara, and Hinckley, about 10 employees aired their grievances about James, which essentially boiled down to him being a tough boss to work for. At the end of this 6-hour struggle section, Tierman and fellow board member John Garvey put him on leave and stripped him of all authority. It was literally a Stalin-esque kangaroo court trial. I would have said Kafka-esque myself. The thing that is so very profound to me is that no one seems to grasp. John Garvey and the rest of the board did nothing to stop it. Matt Tierman had it all scripted, all 6 hours of it." Close quote. This comes in the immediate aftermath of Project Veritas' greatest moment ever, exposing corruption at Pfizer, which my source thought was extremely suspicious timing. You boot the founder right after your biggest win of all time? PV must explain the situation. My source believes that with enough public support, James O'Keefe could win back support of the 501c4 board. So please retweet and voice your support in a positive way. James O'Keefe has done more to expose corporate corruption than almost any journalist in modern history. If James O'Keefe leaves, I, meaning Swig, will no longer support Project Veritas and will support whichever venture James O'Keefe starts instead. My source says that the rank-and-file employees are still with James. The board needs to realize PV will likely not survive if they go through with this. That was February 8th. The next day, Swig said, quote, "I woke up to 1.3 million notifications this morning. Crazy. No one was able to follow me last night. So try again if you are interested in follow-up tweets. I've been reached out to by additional Project Veritas insiders who have more to say about the issue." Close quote. The next day, they came the next day, and he posted an update in the form of a 4-tweet thread. I've left links in the description to the first, third, and fourth tweets. The anchor tweet has an embed of a letter, its inside address redacted away. It is a cease and desist demand letter from a lawyer claiming to represent some of Project Veritas' biggest donors. Addressed to Project Veritas' board. Swig's source obviously sent that in with this message, quote, "The bigwig donors to Project Veritas are not taking the board actions against James O'Keefe lying down. Looks like they have hired a big-name law firm that sent a letter which seems to suggest that the board is running afoul of Virginia law and exposing themselves to substantial liability. Why don't they understand? James is Project Veritas. Project Veritas is James. We the people stand with James," close quote. Swig continued with a tweet linked to Project Veritas action, which is the 501c4 arm. Now let me explain. Section 501c of the Internal Revenue Code deals with certain classes of tax-exempt organizations, including labor unions, by the way. The threes are charities, contributions to whom are tax deductible. The fours are permitted to be political, so their spending is tax exempt, but their contributions are not tax deductible. The activities of such organizations must stay separate to be within the law. 4 days later, we now come to Valentine's Day. Swig shared a letter from Wally and Diana Remmers denying one of the specific allegations against Mr. O'Keefe. Namely, that he high-pressured Wally Remmers to draw him a $75,000 check on the spot. Not only that, but Diana Remmers asked Mr. O'Keefe for a picture, and he rudely and publicly turned her down. False! Not only did Wally Remmers deny the allegation, but Diana Remmers gave an interview to Dinesh D'Souza, also denying them. I have a link in the description to Dinesh D'Souza's tweet embedding the video of that interview. Later that day, Swig sources reported that pandemonium now reigned at the Project Veritas headquarters building, with most of the staff still supporting James O'Keefe. The next day, actually this was 1 week ago today, Mr. Daniel Strack, Executive Director, released a statement to staff. I have a link to that in the description. I'll read you just part of it. Quote, "A few weeks ago, a number of our staff members provided leadership with some verbal feedback describing real management concerns regarding the treatment of people and our internal processes. This prompted the board to solicit feedback from additional staff, and that internal letter was leaked. The narrative that is being portrayed by referencing this letter is patently false. James has not been removed from Project Veritas," close quote. Well, you could have fooled me. He goes on to give some more boilerplate, then takes pains to say that Project Veritas is not and never will be brought to you by Pfizer. But he never explains the timing, or ordering James O'Keefe to stay away. The source had more than a few words to say about that. Before I repeat those words, I want to shout out to a sponsor who can really help you through the economic storms to come. That sponsor is oursilverlines.com. Do you feel like you're working harder for your money just to get by? You are not alone. The fluctuating economy, employment issues, and unexpected changes in life have left many families struggling over the past few years. Collecting gold and silver can help shield you against many of these challenges. But if you're like me many years ago, you don't know where or how to start. Our Silver Lines helps by connecting you with thousands of members who are learning the secrets to creating and protecting true wealth by collecting precious metals. Whether you just want to collect rare and unique coins or take advantage of the business opportunities this company provides, they can help you learn to live an exceptional life. Visit oursilverlines.com to learn how you can build a legacy for your future. Excuse me just a minute. Now, back to what Swig's source said about that god-awful statement. Quote, "The tell in this statement is, prompted the board to solicit and that internal letter was leaked. The board is admitting the coup right here. They solicited negative feedback about James from employees, and they then leaked that compilation of negative things to the press to give themselves an excuse to make James step down as CEO and give up his powers. They never wanted James to quit or leave entirely. They knew they could not get by without his fundraising, but they also wanted control, and that's the proof that this was a coup, and it was about control. The board wanted to control him, so they manufactured a situation to get control of him. It is deceitful and disgraceful. They should all resign. Close quote. Then, on Monday, February 20th, that's 2 days ago, things blew wide open. Swig made this statement in a tweet that he tacked on to his main thread, so I've listed that link separately. Quote, "Scoop. My source inside Project Veritas says that James O'Keefe said he is returning to the main office this morning. Not clear what his intentions are." Close quote. Now, those intentions, I can tell you now. His intentions were to call a private meeting of his most loyal friends still at Project Veritas in his office. This he did, in a meeting that lasted 45 minutes. James O'Keefe recorded that meeting and said repeatedly that he intended it for internal distribution only. At that meeting, he detailed all the drama surrounding him from his perspective. O'Keefe did admit to giving the board an ultimatum toward the end, that either they went or he went. They didn't go, so he was going, now that he had no authority and was not even on the payroll anymore. He finished in an emotional moment as he announced that he would fill a box with a few personal items, including a framed diploma, carry said box to his automobile, and drive away. And how do I know all this? Because before the day was out, YouTube and Twitter influencers Charlie Kirk and Benny Johnson acquired the video, neither man ever said from whom, and shared it. Charlie Kirk didn't embed the entire video. Instead, he dropped a thread with key moments and explanatory notes. I have links in the description to 6 tweets from it. Here are his excerpts. "Our mission continues on. I'm not done. The mission will perhaps take on a new name. There were tactical disagreements about the boldness of soliciting donations. Then he describes his confrontation with Mr. O'Hara, the CFO, that led to the blow-up. He shared text messages from a board member. It turned out to be Matt Tiermond, offering to raise people's salaries if they would support a restructuring of Project Veritas with James O'Keefe out not being CEO anymore. O'Keefe spoke of meeting with a board member at his home. This said board member saying he, O'Keefe, had nothing to do with breaking that Pfizer story. Ladies and gentlemen, you know that's absurd. And if you have any doubts, play the video of O'Keefe confronting Dr. Walker. Ask yourself whether he had nothing to do with it. Gets worse. Apparently, the board discussed Mr. O'Keefe's dates with certain women in front of donors. And one of several complaints they had about his being a spendthrift was spending more than $12,000 as a down payment on a wedding. Whoops! James O'Keefe is still a bachelor, and that money was for the company Christmas party. O'Keefe went on to say that he was in the office to gather his personal belongings since he no longer had a job. He reflected on the beginnings of the company that he founded and the various external threats he and others have faced along the way. Now you can verify all this for yourselves because Benny Johnson shared the video in its entirety in a YouTube video and in a tweet. I have links in the description to both. At 7:13 p.m. Eastern Time, the board tweeted out a link to a public statement. I have a link in the description to the tweet. The link within the tweet to the statement is good. And that is all that's good about it. Again, they denied firing him and said this, quote, "The board and management made numerous attempts in the last 14 days to have a conversation with James, but he ignored our outreach and decided to instead leak private information to others, either by doing so himself or by proxy," close quote. Well, O'Keefe disputes that. In his office speech, he says the board ordered him to stay away and attempt no contact with anyone. That was an official board resolution with all the force of a judicial injunction. Were he to disobey that order, the board might have gone to court to get a real injunction. And perhaps court is the only place to sort out who, between O'Keefe and the board, is telling the truth. After that statement, about which I will have more to say, came out, James O'Keefe himself shared the video on his own account. I have a link in the description to his tweet. So, what did the board allege that he did? The operative phrase is self-dealing, or to be as highfalutin as the board chose to be, personal inurement, I-N-U-R-E-M-E-N-T. It's when an officer abuses his expense account, travel allowances, company car, or other perquisites. Now, if he flat out draws checks to himself for no good or accountable purpose, the law calls that embezzlement. Bear in mind that James O'Keefe routinely brought in millions of dollars to Project Veritas. Last year alone, he brought in $22 million, double what he brought in 2021. So let's look at the board's complaints. Quote, "Here are a few examples of what has been uncovered so far by PV leadership. This is far from an exhaustive list. It is merely a small representative sample. $14,000 on a charter flight to meet someone to fix his boat under the guise of meeting with a donor. $60,000 in losses by putting together dance events such as Project Veritas Experience. Over $150,000 in black cars in the last 18 months. Thousands of dollars spent on DJ and other equipment for personal use." DJ? Disc jockey? Who knows? The statement didn't explain that. "And hundreds of other acts of personal inurement. Total amount of alleged self-dealing, less than $250,000. Now, of all the pettifogging complaints one person can make against another, these are some of the worst. And about those hundreds of other acts, notice that the board gave no figure even for a total amount. If this is their representative sample, then they chose poorly. So what do we have? I'll tell you what we have. A pack of lies. Dirty, stinking lies. The statements by Project Veritas are the kind of statement people make when they don't want to admit their purpose up front. Instead, they lie about what a person did and then lie to everyone else about their own intentions. James O'Keefe does have a problem. If he founds another company, he cannot call former staff to recruit them actively. Laws protect companies against that sort of thing. But if a member of Project Veritas staff calls him and applies for a job, he is at full liberty to hire him. Still, he cannot use the Project Veritas name, so perhaps he should derive a name not from Latin, but from another ancient language. Say, call it Project Aletheia, from the Greek word for truth, or even Project Urim, literally lights in Hebrew, after the objects called the Urim and Thummim that the high priests of ancient Israel wore on their shoulders and used for the exercise known as to inquire of the Lord. Look, that you can see that several times in 1st and 2nd Samuel. That leaves open one final question. Why did they do it? They didn't do it because he was self-dealing. A man who brings in $22 million in a year will scarcely limit himself to $250,000 worth of self-dealing. We can regard the self-dealing canard as false and turn our attention to other motives on the part of the board. Two schools of thought now exist as to why the Project Veritas board and two of its officers acted as they have. One school blames Matt Tyrmand, Barry Hinckley, and Executive Director Daniel Strack for hatching this plot on their own. According to this theory, they arrogantly decided that Project Veritas could function without James O'Keefe. I have links in the description to 2 tweets of a short thread by a user calling himself Amuse, and the third tweet repeats the second because it's a reply. The Amuse leaves with a link to his article explaining the full timeline and attribution and attributing purely spiteful motives. According to him, it was Barry Hinckley who first told O'Keefe, either you go or I go. Daniel Strack threatened the emergency board meeting, while James O'Keefe was in an airliner with a flight attendant telling him he had to hang up. And airline captains do indeed delay pullout from the gate until all cell phones are turned off or in airplane mode. Matt Tyrmand offered the raises people would get if O'Keefe had to leave, as I also mentioned. The Amuse thread goes further. The second tweet shows a picture of Barry Hinckley with a woman in evening clothes kissing him on the right temple. The caption says, "The new face of Project Veritas, Barry Hinckley. New leadership for a new era. Are you ready to be excited?" No, I'm ready to throw up. Or I would be if I didn't suspect that picture to be a total retouch, i.e. a fake. Amuse continues with a mention from Matt Crouch saying that the New York Young Republican Club threw Matt Tyrmand off their board pending the outcome of an internal investigation. It does rather sound as though Matt Tyrmand has made some serious enemies. But I have a problem with the Amuse piece. It mentions only in passing the timing of these events. Within days of the Pfizer story, the chief operating officer tells the boss, either you go or I go. You know, if you've been listening to my channel for any length of time, whom I am about to quote, once is happenstance, twice is coincidence, and the third time it's enemy action, unquote Ian Fleming. In this case, the most likely enemy is Pfizer Pharmaceuticals, or maybe the entity most likely behind Pfizer, Moderna, the Norfolk Southern Railroad, and many other companies that have brought real physical harm to Americans in the last 3 years. Now, you decide. Did the board act out of spite, or did they act under orders or even under threat? And not of jail time either, but worse. Before I wrap up, I must tell you that the thumbnail for this video derives from a snapshot of James O'Keefe that Gage Skidmore took on December 21st, 2018 in West Palm Beach, Florida. Mr. Skidmore has licensed it under the Creative Commons Attribution and Share Alike 3.0 Unported license, to which I also have a link in the description as Creative Commons requires. Links in the description of the article, to the Creative Commons license for the thumbnail, to the original Pfizer story videos, to Swig's first thread, to his second thread about the demand letter, to Dinesh D'Souza's interview with Diana Remmers, to the first Project Veritas statement, to Swig's alert about James O'Keefe coming into the office, to Charlie Kirk's thread excerpting the video O'Keefe made in that office, to Benny Johnson's full-length releases, to the tweet linking to Project Veritas' second statement, to James O'Keefe's own tweet embedding the video, to the Amuse thread, to my Declarations of Truth Twitter account, and to Conservative News and Views. I've also left links to the awesome CNAV Store and to oursewerlines.com, as I also mentioned. You know already about how to like a video, turn on notifications, and leave a tip. On the end screen, I'm going to leave a subscribe link to my channel and links to a new Project Veritas debacle playlist, to the video of James O'Keefe confronting Dr. Walker of Pfizer, and to Benny Johnson's full-length release. This is Terry A. Hurlbut delivering another declaration of truth and reminding you to let the truth set you free.